What do you think are some of the challenges? Okay, so let's talk about these particular things one by one. So let me take it on the left hand side, right? And let's talk about the challenges, right? Help me out. What do you think are some of the challenges? What? That's it. Let's stick to that. What's the purpose of collecting? Okay, what's the purpose for collecting the data? Right? What's the purpose for collecting the data? Very good.
Where you get the data from?
Here you get the data from. Right?
You got to make sure you're compliant with any legislation.
Okay. Whether it is complying with any legal or legal rules. Okay.
I found that sometimes you could pay or collect data from like people that you have collected data from previously. So that's kind of like a waste of money in a sense, as like the dealer.
So is that a challenge?
Yeah, because you're paying for what you already have in a sense. So like, how would you know that the data that you're buying you don't already have?
Okay, so you are talking from a different perspective. That suppose if in case you are actually an agent and you are buying some amount of data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What if the data that you are buying is already existing with you, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now you are actually thinking out from an agent perspective, and you are thinking that from buying this particular data rather than actually sharing your data.
Can I add some other perspective as well?
Yeah, yes, sir.
I would have thought that from the state perspective, they would have a challenge in respect of a crime related to data accessibility to people who probably make money out of it or use it for criminal activity. So they probably would like to somehow regulate that side on one hand, but on the other hand, they probably want to have more data on potential criminals, and they want to have more data about people's activities in public places, including video surveillance, things like that.
Also, the data seems to be growing very fast. So storage might soon be a big problem.
So storage of the data could be a problem.
Growing quickly. Yeah.
Problem as storage and the processing of the data, right? I can actually write.
May I also jump in with another idea? From the business perspective, they might want to have an idea where the data comes from. So they purchase data from data banks. They probably, I don't know if it is actually trackable or not, but they probably want to assume that data comes from legal sources, just in case that nobody comes back at them and say, guys, you actually acquired criminally, I don't know, you helped some criminal activity by buying this data.
Okay, so is that the same for something like
no, I think it's from the not from the government point of view, from the business point of view. Business probably wants to know where the data comes from. Maybe it's in the future, maybe not now, but James is looking.
Yes, absolutely.
Actually, that's a very good step for what I was thinking as a challenge. Firstly, as a provider, how do I know how my data is used? But most importantly, from a tech perspective overall for the entire industry and pipelines, how do I know who has access to the data and what kind of actions they take from generation up to, so from the creation of the data up to being collected from, an agent or a company to use it for marketing purposes and so on. So I would like to have a log for all that and prevent access. And how do I know who has access? How do I keep people out? Like the nurse, for example. How do I know that she can just plug in a USB in hospital records and just download 100,000 people's files and sell them on the dark web?
Can I just quickly answer that? If you do work for like council and stuff, they don't allow you to download stuff off your phone by USB. They've got some sort of enterprise software that comes with Windows specifically that bans it. But I think that's triggered by the IT department. So
yeah, that might be the case in some companies in the rest of developed countries. I'm just looking from a global perspective.
That's great if it exists. What about every individual when we sign up to some websites, such as job websites, we give out quite a lot of our details, and then this data is getting sold on and sold on again. I don't know if you have experienced when suddenly, after signing up to some website, you get emails from completely different organizations. But how an individual can track where their data goes? Can I access any information about that?
I think the information is probably in that like policy that no one ever reads and just accepts. Maybe that's why they probably say that they'll share your data.
Well, in my case, it was even an employment agency that sold my data after 2 years of working with me. They just wanted to make some buck and they sold it without letting me know. So there isn't any regulation in this respect.
Well, I think from a business point of view, how do I actually access or retrieve this data in a way that would be quick and would be of use to me? Because it looks like there's so much, all sorts of records from all sorts of shady people, both shady and legal. So how do I make this data useful from a business point of view quickly?
then also, how do they dispose data? How do you dispose data without getting into the hands of the wrong people?
Can I also add to that? If you're dealing with a country that's say outside of the EU or the UK at the moment, how is that data managed and do the laws beyond the EU and the UK does it affect how the data is managed, stored and processed?
Okay, so anything else I'm actually missing out?
Yeah, I said about disposing the data.
Disposing the data, is that something that you are trying to say? How can I be sure
store the data when they're out of date or something without getting into the wrong hands.
Yes, so this is what I think we have done. Yes, yes.
I think also making sure the data is up to date.
Okay.
We talked about the integrity of the data.
But could you do that if you don't have access, like if it's not your data? Because you can always ask for your customers to update their information, but you can't. You have no hold over the customer or the client. They have no obligation to you because you're a third party. You know what I mean?
Yes, so can you please repeat again? I did not get you. Can you say?
Well, if it's not your customer, then they're not obligated to tell you what's going on in their lives if something could have happened. It's really difficult to trace someone unless you're going to do it through some very illegal means to find out exactly what they're doing, where they're doing it, and all that stuff. Like there's an option for the Secret Service option, right? And that'd be probably the most likely way you'd be able to find out exactly what they're up to, even without someone through their address. But
Okay, so I
What-
think.
Okay, it's okay. I've seen what I wanted to say is what we're written down. I wanted to say what data is collected, why is it collected, where it is collected, and for what purpose. It's like it's almost capturing all this information.
Yeah, we are not aware about they are using for what reason, why, and what they will be going to do, right?
Okay, that's interesting.
Do we already, we've got you know, yesterday you mentioned something about veracity. Veracity?
That's right.
So, we were aware that some of the sources are illegal. And
Where exactly? That's where we go with it.
But, I mean, I know this is the game and you're supposed to be doing it in the game, but isn't that what GDPR is supposed to do? You're not allowed to use the data in any other way than the person signed up for. So if it's for an application for a job or I don't know, any other application you make, it should only be for that use. And then even if it's like the bank card details, that's the reason why they cut out all the rest of it. They only give the person access to the last 4 digits so that they can keep things private. So even the sale of data for something other than what it was supposedly for in the first place, plus by a different company, that's really illegal, isn't it? And you're supposed to be able to sue them for like 2 million or something if they use it against you or just illegally.
Yeah.
Yes, so that is something on the solution side that we are talking about, right? Right, it's the last 4 digits of your credit card number or your bank account number, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so fine. So really, thank you so much for these further challenges. I totally agree that all of these further challenges are really valid, right? But still, we have been actually sharing our data, right, to multiple organizations, be it Facebook, be it Twitter, be it Google, be it Microsoft, be it your banks, be it your insurance companies, or be it your travel agents. So you have been giving this particular data, right? Now, uh, with respect to the solution side, okay, so let us look from a solution perspective, right? So these are some of the challenges that we have been actually seeing, right? So let's talk about the solutions, which is actually the most important part over here. So what do you think could be some of the solutions that we could implement, right? Or these particular companies or these particular agents could actually implement in order to avoid these particular challenges.
I know that in the UK they have an organisation called the ICO, and they basically have said since March, I think, this year, that any company that's been registered as a company in this country has to basically say how they're using data, and they pay like a yearly fee, and if they're not using it according to the degree that they said they were going to, then they're able to be fined, and it will be written against them in a record that you can find online. That's because GDPR and all that stuff.
Right, so one of the particular solution, right, so very village, right, so just like these particular companies, so they need to have certain sort of legal compliances, right, that's how they will be going to use this particular data, and how they will be going to safeguard the data, right?
I think they're also regulating how long you can have the data for, and you have to destroy it after a certain time. But if it works or not, it's questionable. Also, maybe they can like divide, for example, one source of data into different parts, and then maybe the name and to be controlled by one authority, and also the data itself can be well, belong to, well, they can use part of data rather than the whole.
So you are at least saying that suppose we talk about the data, right? So the data is being broken into different chunks, wherein each of these particular chunks is being managed by different stakeholders or different units, right?
Yeah, so maybe like name, so we don't expose the name, we just expose like what's being done, so they can do something about like processing the data, but not able to go back to like disrupt personal life. So that might be the other.
Okay, so one of the things over here is column and row level securities, right?
Yeah.
So let me just explain you about it, how we can actually implement these particular column and row level securities in the databases. And one of the particular thing is encryption, right?
Yeah.
So when your data is actually traveling over a particular network, right, or when your data is being saved, right, so just ensure that this data is being encrypted. Okay. So when I'm talking about encryption, it is the data in transit, right, and data at rest.
Also, I think from the business point of view, implement a cloud solution so that even when the data grows, you know that if you have pay as you pay something service.
Like the pay per use.
Exactly. So even if your data gets really unwieldy and really grows exponentially, you know that it's not costing your company too much to implement on-premise servers or data warehouses. You can just host it on the cloud.
Okay, but the main problem is we can actually host it on the cloud, but how we will be going to safeguard the data?
Sorry? How will
save the data?
Who's receive the data?
How, how we can actually ensure the security.
Oh, from what you explained yesterday, I think it's possible to do that on the cloud. I mean, you can if you have like Excel or something, you could create a password for your file, like if you wanted to do your file, and then hopefully even if they hack your device and they get into it, they can't get into the actual file.
I think we also need backups. Yeah, backups are really required, right?
Isn't it that every company decides themselves whether they want cloud services, which they trust, or they prefer storing data on premises? As far as I understand, some banks don't trust clouds and they prefer keeping it all on their own servers.
Right, so that is true, right? So we will learn about KMS, which is actually Key Management Service. I will talk about it. I'm just writing down all these particular points, right? So you have a very, very, very valid point, right? That some companies don't trust, and just in real life, I can actually to give you an example. I was uh, I was actually working with HSBC for one of a particular consulting project around a couple of years back, and HSBC actually signed up with Google Cloud for their data warehousing and for their AI related needs, right? And it was sometime in the year of 2018 and 2019 start when HSBC asked Google Cloud uh, that please sign up this particular agreement, wherein there was actually a particular clause that Google Cloud is actually giving a 100% guarantee that this data will not be going to be compromised. Okay. So during that particular time, Google Cloud actually denied to that particular agreement. They said we really cannot give you a 100% assurance that your data will not be going to be get compromised. We can give you a 99% assurance, we can give you 99.9% assurance, but we cannot give you a 100% assurance, right? So give us a couple of years and we will be there in a state wherein we can write on this particular letter or on this particular stamp paper that your data will not be going to be compromised. Okay, right? So you have a very very valid point, right? So still some of the organizations, right, and when I talk about the financial organizations or the insurance organizations, they still they still have a kind of a hesitation whether we should move to the cloud or not, right? Because of this particular compromising thing only. Okay, what else?
Well, if we touch
Uh,
that side of things, a firewall.
Which one?
Firewalls
Right,
for security.
right, firewalls, very good. Okay, so let's talk about these particular things one by one, right? Uh, with respect to the legal compliances, right? So definitely, so this is something that is being asked by most of the companies, right? So just like I can actually give you a kind of a real life example. Uh, since I am actually running my own startup, a kind of a very very small company, so we actually thought of building a particular the capability for the online sellers. Okay, so just like you know about Amazon.com, right? For Amazon.com, so there is actually a particular customer part, right? And there is also a vendor or a particular seller part, right? So what we thought for is to build a particular capability around these particular sellers, right? And to give them give them a kind of a clear picture, right? For their items that they are actually shipping, right? So think about that. Suppose a particular seller is actually sending some 5 items for candles to a particular customer, and there is suppose a certain sort of a return that actually happens, right? So in that particular return, Amazon.com will be going to charge seller some sort of fees, right? And that particular fees is actually not a particular single item, but that particular piece is actually inclusive of multiple things, right? So whether this is actually the courier service, this is this, this is this, this is this, and this is this, right? So we thought of building a particular application for the sellers, wherein the sellers will be going to get a kind of a transparency that when Amazon.com has actually charged uh, the to them, right? So in what breakups, okay, they have actually charged, right? And during that particular time, we actually signed up with Amazon.com, uh, and uh, when we actually launched our application onto the production region, so during that particular time, Amazon.com actually asked us all these particular things, that how you will be going to safeguard the data of those particular sellers, right? That are actually signing on your portal, right? And what are some of the regulations around that? And if in case a particular seller is going to sign out from your portal, how you are actually ensuring that you are deleting the required history, right? And what are some of the mechanisms around it? Then we have to give all those particular justifications to Amazon.com, and telling them that we have actually created a particular program which will be going to do this. We we have actually written a particular script to do that, etc., etc. And thereafter, it was actually a couple of hours call with the Amazon Web Services team, wherein they actually checked all these particular things in our portal, right? So whether all these particular things are actually happening or not. Okay. So right now, so there are these particular regulations are right, but these particular regulations are typically for some of the big companies, right? But suppose if in case I talk about a very small company, right? So for that particular small company, they might not be following all those particular checks and compliances what actually Amazon.com or Facebook.com is actually doing, right?
Mm.
Okay, so this is something about the legal compliances and all. This the third part is about the column and the row level security. Very interesting thing. Okay, so let me just explain you what is column level security and row level security, and how we can actually implement it. Okay, so think about that within your database, suppose you have a particular table, and this particular table is suppose the customer table. Okay, customer table. So in this particular customer table, I do have a customer ID, I do have a name, I do have the date of birth, I do have something like address, and I do have the mobile number, and plus, suppose I do have the credit card number also. Okay, credit card number. Right? So all these particular information, okay, that I am talking about, which is your date of birth, which is your address, which is your mobile number, your credit card number, these particular information are actually known as PII information. Okay. By PII, we stand for personal identifiable identifiable information. Okay. And PII is something like your sensitive information, right? Because mobile number is something sensitive, address is something sensitive, date of birth or age is something sensitive, credit card number is actually sensitive, right? So when I am talking about the row level security, right? Row level security, right? Right. So think about a scenario wherein, suppose you have the data for the entire Europe, okay, in this, okay, for the entire Europe, uh, and suppose we have another country over here, right? So we have a particular record over here, right? And if this is for a particular country, UK, this is for a particular country as Germany, right? This is again for a particular customer who is from Germany. This is from France, right? So like this. Now there would be different people, right, across the Europe who will be going to access to this particular table, right? So what we can actually implement as part of the row level security, and that actually depends on your business, the business call, right, or your business decision, that the people who are actually accessing the data from Germany, right, will be only able to see the records for the country of Germany. Okay, the people, okay, or those particular agents of that particular company who are from UK, they will be only able to see the records who are from the country of UK. Right? So, as part of that, what we can actually do, we can create views in databases. In databases. Okay. So, can somebody let me know what is a view, or what is a view?
It's something that you can create in a relational database.
We can create in a relational database, but my question is, what is a view?
Isn't it a saved snapshot?
It's a snapshot.
Maybe a
also,
separate table according to what they can see.
But not the full definition.
Is it what everybody, each person is allowed to see?
So think about, okay, so think about that. Suppose I got this particular customer table, right? Now on this particular customer table, suppose I created some three views, okay, V underscore UK, V underscore Germany, and V underscore France, okay. Now for V underscore UK, right, so what we have to just do, we have to write a view condition, right, create view V underscore UK as select star from customer table where country equal to UK. Okay. So once we have created a particular view, right? So view is some sort of your logical table. Okay. View is not actually having the physical data. The physical data is still there in the table. Okay. You are actually creating a particular view. Okay. So you are creating a particular kind of a window so that this particular person will be just going to see this much of data, right? So this particular person will be just going to see this much of data, right? So once we have created a particular view, all those particular agents, and so can you please get a mute yourself? Hello? Yeah. So all those particular agents who are from UK and we have a business call that these particular agents from UK will be just able to see the data of the UK only, right? So what we can do, once we have created a particular view, then we can actually grant the access of V underscore UK to these particular agents A1, A2, and A3 who are actually looking into the UK market, right? Similarly, we can actually create a particular view for the France. Similarly, we can create a particular view for the Germany also, right? So this is actually one of a particular solution through which we can actually implement a row level security. Clear? So whenever a particular agent A1 will be going to fire a particular query, right? Right. So this particular person just has to fire a particular query, select star from V underscore UK. He or she will be just going to see the records which are pertaining to the UK country. Right? Got it? And we will not be going to give the access. Okay, we will not be going to give the access to anybody on this particular customer table where exactly my physical data is being stored. Okay, and where all my country's data is being stored. Clear to everyone?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So the next thing is about the column level security. Okay. About the column level security, right? So this is something with respect to the row level security that I talked about. The second thing is about the column level security. So when I am talking about the column level security, right? Suppose I talk about the mobile number. Okay, I talk about the mobile number, right? So now what we can actually do as part of the mobile number, we can actually implement certain functions on this particular mobile number. Okay, so what we can actually do, we can create another field over here, mobile underscore suppose new, right? And suppose there is a mobile number something like 1234, right? So we can actually apply a particular function or a particular algorithm on this particular 1234, and we can actually make it in a kind of a random order, right? So just like 4231. Okay, right? So this is actually one different way wherein we can actually have a particular random algorithm on this particular mobile number, right? And suppose let's think about, right? So this particular person A1 wants to get the required information, okay, about a particular customer, but we really don't want A1 to see the exact mobile number, okay, 1234. So what we can actually do over here, instead of star, we can give C underscore ID, all those particular fields that he or she wants to look, name, and we can actually give mobile underscore new, right? In that particular case, this particular customer or this particular agent A1 will be just going to see this particular number, which is actually a particular random number generated out from this particular 1234, right? Another thing is what we can do, we can apply some masking techniques, okay? And when I am talking about the masking techniques, just like I think that somebody said it earlier, right? So just like for credit card numbers, the credit card numbers are actually 16-digit numbers, right? So what we can do, we can actually mask the initial 12 digits, right? And then we can just leave this particular thing as 1234, right? The last 4 digits over here. Okay. So there are different techniques that we can actually make the use of with respect to data masking, with respect to applying these kind of algorithms, so that we can actually ensure that that the required data is actually saved in a particular safe manner within this particular table. Right? Even I can actually tell you one of a particular example while I was working for American Express. Right? American Express is another financial organization, and they were actually having a lot of credit card information about their customers, right. So even I was working as a senior manager with American Express during that particular time. Even I was not having the required access to actually look into the PII information, okay. And suppose I need to look into the PII information, it needs to be approved by my vice president, okay. Why I am actually doing it, okay, what is the business reason uh, uh, due to which I need to look into the PII information. And once the vice president gives the required approval, only then I was able to see the PII information for a selected data records for which I was supposed to do the required analytics or supposed to do the required analysis. Right? So this is something about the row level and the column level security. Right? So the next thing is about the encryption. Okay. So just ensure that whenever your data is actually moving across the traffic, okay, or when your data is being saved, right, then it is being stored or being moved in an encrypted fashion. Okay, so just apply certain sort of encryption techniques or encryption algorithms in order to save that particular data within your disk. Even if some person or some thief actually comes to the data center and actually takes away the disk, still that particular thief will not be able to determine and will not be able to crack that particular encryption algorithm. And there are certain there are number of encryption algorithms that you can actually see, just like AES the 256, and there are some more algorithms related to that. Okay. The next thing is about a virtual network and firewall, right? A very, very important concept. So typically, what actually happens, suppose I talk about any cloud, okay, and in this particular cloud, suppose we are having a particular database, right? And this is suppose the SQL Server database, wherein I do have a particular application, and this particular application is also being hosted on this particular cloud, and this application is writing the data to this particular database, right? So now what we typically do, okay, that we create a kind of a virtual network, okay, virtual network. So uh, so some people say this particular virtual network as also a VPC, right, which is your virtual private cloud, right, wherein this is actually your network, okay, and on this particular network you can actually apply certain firewall rules, okay. By firewall rules I mean to say that only these particular IP addresses, okay, only these particular IP addresses are allowed to access to this particular network and to this particular port. Just like I talk about something like suppose MySQL, right? For MySQL, there is a port 3306. Only these particular IP addresses, and if in case they are accessing with the port of 3306, only then they can actually access to this particular MySQL. Okay, so this is actually an inbound firewall rule that we can actually set on this particular virtual network, and we can also set a outbound firewall rule also, wherein suppose if in case I talk about this application, right? So now this particular application wants to access to the Google or wants to access to some other application which is sitting on a different IP address, right? So we can actually define an outbound firewall rule in this particular case, which will allow this particular application to do the access to that particular application. Okay, so only that particular IP address will be allowed to be accessible to this particular application, and rest all things will be going to be stopped. Right. So this is something about the virtual network and the firewall rule. This is about the authentication and authorization mechanisms. Okay. So can somebody let me know what is the difference between authentication and authorization?
I think authentication is just asking for the password or like right, and then authorization is how much access do you grant if they prove that they have access after them. Yeah.
Correct. So very good, right? So when I am talking about the authentication, right? So think about, suppose you have a database, right? And there is a particular user, James, right? So now James, wants to access to this particular database, right? And wants to create a particular table. Okay, so there are some two things. James wants to access to database, and the second is create a table in this database. Okay, create table. So the first thing that actually comes is the authentication. Okay, whether James is having the required authentication to access to this particular database. Okay, so whether James is having the user ID and the password, right, or the Active Directory account to actually access to this particular database or not, that is something authentication. The second step is your authorization. Okay, by authorization I mean to say that what is the role of, of James that has been specified for this particular database, right? So whether James is just having the select access, okay, or a particular read access to this particular database, or whether James is also having the access related to creating a particular table, or whether James is just having the access to just do only the update and the deletes in the table, right? So depending on the role of James, James can actually do certain things on this particular database, certain things or all the things. Okay, this is something referred as authorization. Okay, the first step is authentication, and the second step is authorization. Okay, which is something role specific, right? So, what is the role of James on this particular database? Whether James is having the role of owner, or James is just having the role of reader, right? So what is the role James is actually having? Right, so clear so far? Any questions? Okay. The next thing is about the backups, right? So this is definitely being required from a disaster recovery perspective, right? So just ensure that you are having the backups of your databases, right? And you are saving these particular backups at a particular regular interval. And if in case anything happens to your active database, right, then you can actually restore your backups, right, within no time. The last thing is about the KMS, okay, the key management service, right? So this particular KMS is something related to your encryption, okay. This particular thing is something related to your encryption. So, so, uh, so typically, what some of the big companies are actually doing, okay, and let me just help you out. While still some of the companies that are just like HSBC or Lloyd's Bank and some other banks are still making the use of Google Cloud or Azure, right? So think about that. Suppose you have your data over here, okay? You have your data over here. So when I am talking about the encryption, right? Uh, so think it Azure, right? So we are on the Azure cloud. So there is actually a particular service named as KMS. Okay. So what Azure does by default, that it actually saves the data in an encrypted fashion, right? And it actually manages that particular required algorithm of the encryption plus the keys of that particular encryption. Okay. And there is also a particular key rotation policy wherein think about it, that this particular key has some sort of a password, okay, wherein this particular password is being rotated, or this particular key is being rotated after every 1 week or after every 1 month, okay. So that is actually the by default encryption. The second level of an encryption is wherein the customer is actually managing the required encryption algorithm, right? And is actually managing the rotation policy for those particular keys, right? And for that particular thing, the customer can actually make the use of this particular service, KMS, which is again lying on the particular cloud, right? And in case of Azure, this is actually known as Azure Vault. Okay. So in this particular Azure Vault, right, so the customer is actually having the key, right, uh, uh, and this particular key is something which is actually encrypting this particular data, right? So now somebody wants to access this particular data, right? So first of all, this particular person needs to go to the Azure Vault, right? Needs to take that particular key, and only then he or she can actually access that particular data. Nowadays, there is another thing that has actually started, wherein this particular KMS, okay, this particular KMS is not lying on the cloud. Rather than this particular KMS is being lying on the on-premise or in the data center of the customer, right? Because the customers actually thought for that again this particular KMS is lying with Microsoft. Okay, how I can really trust, right? So So this is actually the third level of security wherein the KMS is lying on premise, right, for a particular customer, right, and all those particular keys and all those particular rotation policy of the keys is being managed from here itself. And anybody who wants to access the data needs to go into this particular KMS first, needs to take a particular key, and then only he or she can actually access this particular data, right? So this particular third level of security is typically being used by almost all the financial companies, all the insurance companies who are actually making the use of the cloud for their data analytics, for their data warehousing, for their big data, or for their AI related purposes. Okay. Any questions? Right. So the last thing is about the GDPR. Is there anyone who has heard about this particular term? GDPR.
Yeah.
So what is it?
It's basically data protection, but I think that's the European version. We might have, as Britain, because of Brexit, we might have stepped away from having to use it exactly, but it's a good template. I think our data protection is probably going to mimic a lot of it. But it basically means you have to use the data in the way that you said that you're going to use it only for a certain amount of time, and then basically let go of it if you don't need it, and then make sure that it's not being, when it's transferred between teams. Say, for example, in local authority, council stuff, they will only give the initials of the person and the date of birth. They won't do the date of birth with the full name and stuff like that. So keeping to and making sure that you post your policies on your website so that they know what is being collected about them, if that makes sense. And then if not, to be able to be sued for a couple of million maximum.
Absolutely, absolutely, very good, very good. Right, so when I talk about GDPR, right, so there are certain sort of guidelines that have been actually laid out by the governments of different countries. Just like I can talk about India, right? For India, Indian government has also laid out certain sort of GDPR policies, right? Wherein one of the key guideline is that the data, okay, the data of the Indian customers will not be going to be shared, okay, or will not be going to be shipped to some other country, right? So just like UK or just like US, right? So you cannot actually export this particular data outside of the India. Okay, so similarly, it is just like for the EU also, right? European Union, they are having their own GDPR policy, wherein the data cannot be actually shipped outside of the European Union uh, countries, right? Right. And this is something with the GDPR, which is really a kind of a hot topic with these particular days, right? And different organizations really needs to comply with all of these particular GDPR policies and all, right? And likewise, there are actually number of more compliances, just like there is something like basal compliances, SOX compliances, and different compliances, just like AML or anti-money laundering compliances and all, that these particular IT companies or financial companies or insurance companies, it really needs to follow, okay, really needs to follow. HIPAA compliances for the healthcare, just like for the insurance. I actually forgot the name related to the insurance company compliances, but there are different compliances that they have to also follow with respect to it. Okay. So with that particular thing, right? So with respect to the outcome, right? So now, just on a funny side, I would like to ask you, right? So would you be going to share your data now? to some companies or not? Huh? Yes or no?
Depends. There's some of the companies that you come in contact with, you have to share your data. But then you can take, they usually give you a choice to take something that says that they're not allowed to share your data, I believe. So just be more careful to ensure that one, you don't share it with just anybody, and two, the ones you do share it with, you check to see that there's that box to tick.
So be careful not to share your data with everyone, right? And read the agreement, right? Or or uh, or that particular right. So whenever you are actually signing up with the particular company, right? So they are always giving a kind of an agreement, right? That that you have to actually agree, right? So read through that particular agreement while you are actually doing the sign up, right? And that particular agreement actually talks about uh, what exactly this particular company will be going to do with your data, right? And just have a look to those particular conditions and all. And if in case if you are not satisfied with it, right, so you can definitely mail to that particular company, and they can really help you out. Okay. Just like I can also talk about the one another very interesting use case. Although you will actually feel that this how the things also happen. Okay. So this was actually for a particular company. I am not actually disclosing the name for this particular company, XYZ. So this particular company uh, has a major presence in China, uh, Indonesia, right? Indonesia, and few more countries of the APAC region, right? And this particular company actually launched their operations in India sometime in the year of 2017. Right? So the main objective of this particular company was to actually provide small loans, okay, small loans, right? So think about that. Suppose if you actually need something like 50 pounds, okay, or you need something like 100 pounds, and you don't have it, right? You don't have it right now, right? So this particular company was actually providing you small loans, okay, not something like not something like 500K or not something like that, but some small loans, okay. And me and I actually got in touch with one of their marketing heads, and I was supposed to create one of a particular AI model for them. Okay, and during that particular discussion, it actually came out that this particular company XYZ will be just going to prepare a particular mobile app. Okay, will be just going to prepare a particular mobile app, and they will not be going to have a web version for it, just a mobile app. Then I actually asked the CMO of this particular company, right? So why they are just having a mobile app, right? So and why not a particular web version? So then this particular CMO actually told to me, right? CMO is Chief Marketing Officer. So CMO actually told to me that because we are making the use of the mobile app, right? And we are asking a particular person to install this particular mobile app, and then requesting for a loan, right? For a loan, right? And plus, we are not going to check his credit. We are not going to check his CIBIL score or the FICO score or or the uh, or the scores related to the financial industry, right? Then I asked him that why we are why we are actually giving a loan of something like 50 pounds or 100 pounds to a particular customer when you are not checking the credit score of that particular customer. Then he actually told to me that that what we actually do when a particular customer is actually installing a particular mobile app, right? So during the installation, we are actually uh, getting all the required permissions that we will be going to read your SMS. We will be going to see the information related to the calls that you have actually made. Okay, all those particular checks we actually ask a particular customer to actually agree, and only then a particular customer can actually install a particular app. And why we are actually giving a particular loan, and so the reason is that this particular company XYZ will be actually going to look into the SMS, okay, of that particular mobile phone, and looking to the SMS, right? So there will be actually a lot of messages from their banks, right? From different banks. So just like from Lloyd's Bank, from the different banks that are related to credits, that are related to debits, that are related to loan payments, etc., etc. Right? So since we are getting the access to those particular SMS, right? So that is actually the only way we are actually approving that particular loan and giving a particular person a loan. Okay. So again, it is something. This is something which is not actually legal or not actually ethical, but still a lot of companies are actually doing it. Right?
So that means that another challenge would be ethical business behavior, because someone has to ensure that people don't do things like this because it's actually not ethical.
Right.
That's something else we have to add.
Right. Okay. So anything else do you think from an outcome perspective?
You know, in terms of sharing data, if you have your mobile data on your phone, does that mean that they can't read it, even if you've accidentally accepted someone's agreement to do that? Because on your end, you're kind of taking your data off, like not being shared. It's not able to be shared by you to others.
I think if in case we talk about some of the big companies, that will be very fair, right? So this is again a kind of a question mark to me also, right? But if in case we talk about some of the big companies that are just like Amazon or just like Twitter or just like Google or Microsoft, right? So definitely these particular people are actually complying with these particular access things. However, if in case that you are sharing your data to some XYZ portal or some actually small company, then there may be actually certain things that which could actually compromise your data, right? So that is something up to your luck that I can think of. And finally, it is the luck that I can actually say. Okay. Okay. So with that particular thing, right? Fine. So is there any questions on these particular stuff, this particular data dealer exercise? Right. So was it something interesting?
Can we get a copy of those notes? Is that possible?
Yes. Okay. Yes, so I will do that.
And are we going to have a break soon?
Yes, so we can actually have the break, but just as a reminder, right, to everyone, I have actually shared out a particular link on the chat window, right? So just copy that particular file from the G drive location to your local machine. Okay, it is actually a 5 to 6 the GB